All right, we are recording, and it has begun. By that I mean the inconsistencies. I'm not too happy about that, but at least it gives me more to talk about. Okay, so yes, Chapter 3 of Phantom Menace. Um, so yeah, the first note I have here, it is an interesting one, especially after I fix that typo. Um, in that, so this is, Chapter 3 is where the movie actually starts. So we've got Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on the ship coming to the Trade Federation blockade. Um, Now, what's kind of interesting is initially it seems like they're kind of hiding who they are. Just this figure in the shadows standing behind the captain and the co-pilot. But then it kind of gets quick into saying, yeah, that it's a Jedi and that's Qui-Gon. Um, which on the one hand, it is you could wait to reveal that. You could let that be a secret for a while. And then, when they actually arrive, you have something that tips off the reader. But then on the other hand, it also occurred to me, yeah, we just went from Tatooine, which is a world that you're going to be familiar with if you have any familiarity with Star Wars. And thinking about prior to this, you had both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, that part of those movies are set on Tatooine. So, um, whereas now we're around Naboo. What is a Naboo even could be a question. So I can understand it being no, we're going to spoil that. Well, not really spoil. We're going to say kind of early that that's what's going on here because we just threw you in somewhere you have no idea where. So let's give you something that is more familiar and not keep so many secrets from you. So I'm okay with that. So that's just, me talking about the writing. I don't remember if it's mentioned in the movie or not, but the dispute that is brought about this blockade is over a tax on the trade routes. So obviously that impacts the Trade Federation. Okay. Now I'm just, because there's a number of inconsistencies here. I mean, some are even like, on this part of the page it says one thing, on this part of the page it says something that doesn't really agree with that. Yeah, I'll just try to go in order here. That'll be easiest than jumping around. So Qui-Gon seems to have studious knowledge. Like he has studied this and made a study of it. Where is it? I think it's on this page, is it? Oh no, it is. He seems to have a studious knowledge that he's been studying this. He's familiar with the Neimoidians. The Trade Federation is familiar with all that. More than just hey, I need you to go on this mission, and say, all right, I'll look into it. Because it has, the Neimoidians were entrepreneurs, not fighters. They lacked the backbone necessary to undertake a challenge to the Republic. Somehow they had found that backbone. It bothered Qui-Gon that he could not explain how. If he were just given the mission, it's irrelevant whether or not he can explain anything. Even if he's then studying, he might be like, you describe it as he is left with this question. Not as though he has some responsibility to answer the question, just say he has the question. So this does seem to suggest that he is part of this, that he is more political than, at least I would think from the movie, or more political than the Jedi should be. So right there is a little weird. Yeah, because as I put in my notes, it doesn't matter if he can explain why or not. That's totally irrelevant. Yeah. I do this a lot, just sometimes it doesn't stand out as much to me, is I'm basically talking to myself in OBS there, so I'm just trying to move the window so it's a bit more aligned. Okay, it's actually on the same page here, where it describes, I just want to see if I can spot it here. Okay. Wait, is it after that? Yeah. And at last, the Supreme Chancellor had secretly notified the Jedi Council that he had sent 2 Jedi directly to the ostensible initiators of the blockade. In theory, the Jedi Knights served the Supreme Chancellor, responding on his direction to life-threatening situations. But any interference in the internal politics of the Senate's member bodies, particularly blah, 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 blah. Basically, what that's explaining there, the second part, is that the Senate won't be happy that the Chancellor has chosen to do this. But what's interesting is the Jedi serve the Chancellor, who is Valoran at the moment. Sorry, I'm just trying to read it again. And also that he secretly notified the council that he sent 2 Jedi. So he gave these Jedi, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, an order without even the council knowing. What? This is actually very important. It really is, because it does suggest that the Chancellor does have such high influence over the Jedi. But then, and it's just the Supreme Chancellor was skirting the edges of his authority in this case. That's the whole when they was talking about the Senate, that they won't be happy with this. But he's basically just gambling that it'll work and they'll be upset with me, but things will be calmer, so we can have that debate. But then we get, just further down on the same page, the Jedi Knights were peacemakers. That was the nature of their order and the dictate of their creed, except apparently answering to the Chancellor and doing what he wishes. For thousands of years, they had served the Republic, a constant source of stability and order in a changing universe. If you're serving the Chancellor, that by its nature changes, like whoever is in power will change, you're not really serving stability. It's like, the Jedi Order should be equal and separate, should be independent. They have a specific purpose and specific rules to themselves that the Senate and the Chancellor certainly don't really have sway over. They negotiate, they work together, they collaborate, but one does not control the other. That's dangerous. That's corruption. Now, obviously, a lot of the prequel trilogy has to do with corruption, both of the government and also of the Jedi Order, because you will see that, well, they're not necessarily corrupt as you'd expect politicians to be, but they're not as noble as they should be, I think. That is most of what I mean by the corruption. But yeah, I mean, it's the same page, and we're getting conflicting statements here. Do the Jedi serve for stability and order, or do they serve the Chancellor? It's also interesting, one thing here is that founded as a theological and philosophical study group so far back that its origins were the stuff of myth, the Jedi had only gradually become aware of the presence of the Force. Years had been spent in its study and contemplation, blah, blah, blah. And I actually do want to come back to that point. But it still is interesting how it's actually saying that initially the Jedi were formed not concerning the Force. The Force came later. Well, their understanding of it came later. That I find interesting. Then also talks about something else here. That understanding the Force sufficiently to master its power required more than private study. It required service to the greater community and implementation of a system of laws that would guarantee equal justice for all. The battle was not yet won, it probably never would be, but the Jedi Knights would not see it lost for lack of their trying. So a little political messaging into it, that's fine. Whatever. You're allowed to do that. When you tell a story, you're allowed to do that. But here's my problem. How does this explain the Sith? No, I mean, seriously, how do the Sith, which don't have a requirement of service to the greater community and implementation of a system of laws to guarantee equal justice for all, the Sith are tyrants. They are interested in serving their own goals, their own purposes. They are more or less hedonistic in how they've so often been well, not really hedonistic. Well, I don't know. Jabba was hedonistic. I guess maybe the Sith aren't, from what we've seen. But they are consumed with their own, satisfying their own desires, desire for power and such. So, how does that align here? Because what you're saying here is that in order to understand the Force, you must be of service. The Sith are not about serving anyone but themselves, so this is a disagreement that is very much problematic, especially since we do end up getting the Sith later, in the book. Oh yeah, also the whole requires more than private study. Yoda went to Dagobah to be alone and meditate. Obi-Wan was looking over Luke but was also alone and meditating. I guess we could just go with this is a false statement, but the problem there is, does that mean we shouldn't trust this narrator? That's a legitimate problem. I mean, we can't be like, oh, well, this just doesn't apply for the Sith. It doesn't apply for the Jedi either. It's just a statement here. Let's just ignore it. It's like, and I'm sorry, but this isn't even like we're going to be changing it later on. I mean, sure, fine. The explanation comes at the end of Revenge of the Sith that Yoda's going to Dagobah to be on his own, to meditate on the Force and all that. Fine. You can say that. The problem is, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. He is there. He is alone. He's been doing this. Why did he go into self-imposed exile? He could have hidden somewhere else. He could have hidden around people where he was having an influence. Not as obvious what's going on. But he could, I mean, you still have the end here that contradicts what they're describing and the Sith. Okay, what was the next point? Okay, that was it. I think this one was actually over here. The Jedi had been shown a hologram of Amidala before they left Coruscant. The Queen favored theatrical paint and ornate dress, cloaking herself in trappings and makeup that disguised her true appearance while lending her an aura of both splendor and beauty. She was a chameleon of sorts, masking herself to the world at large and finding companionship almost exclusively with the cadre of handmaidens who were always with her. This is important. And it's actually another inconsistency. Some of this is actually a little bit with the movie, but how it's described that she dresses that way and wears the makeup by choice. But later, okay. Cloaked in her ceremonial robes, Amidala sat on her throne, an ornate chair on a raised dais fronted by a low, flat surface divider. So we went from she wears this stuff by her choice in order to basically be a chameleon, so you don't know, you can't read her as well, you don't know as much about her, to, oh no, it's ceremonial robes. And I'm pretty sure it is also described that even the makeup is ceremonial. And you do see that with Attack of the Clones, because she's no longer the queen, which is another issue I'm going to get to. It's actually a little bit earlier. But the new queen is in similar makeup. So apparently, it is part of the position. Except she chooses to do it instead of it's part of the... New to the throne, she had only been queen a few months before the blockade had begun. She was young, but it was rumored she was prodigiously talented and extremely well-trained. See, this is another problem. Now, it doesn't get to it here, but as I recall, and this is general, not like I'm recalling anything from when I had read this book like 20 years ago, more than that. That the Naboo queens are actually elected. That yes, they are queens, but it isn't a monarchy. It's more just ceremonial autocracy, I guess, with it being a queen as the leader, as opposed to a king or emperor or dictator, whatever you want to call it. But this, with her being extremely well trained, but if she's elected, why was she trained if she was elected? I mean, it's, are you saying that, I mean, the only way you could really mesh these is if she is part of a political class, in which case then there would be either few candidates that you'd pick from, or a large group of candidates that you pick from, or that no, she's in fact a hereditary queen. Because princesses would be trained, especially in this, because it's the queens who rule. But princes and princesses, you're supposed to train them, because this is something that some people do fail to see, fail to remember, fail to understand. And to be fair, some of the monarchs in history have been really, really bad at this. But you were supposed to actually train, the king and queen are supposed to train their children to be good, competent leaders. Now, some of them were very bad at training. Some of them, when they became the kings and queens, were very bad at it as well. Were complete tyrants. But you were supposed to be trained, because you actually did have a duty to the kingdom. All right. So if she is well trained, that does imply it was expected that she would rise to this position, which isn't an election. And it's also, then who did she beat out? I mean, you're saying she's young. So, in the movie, I think she's supposed to be like 15 years old. I think that we're supposed to get to it later that she is only a teenager. What 20-year-old did she beat in this election who would have so much more knowledge and experience? I mean, it's like, may not have as much talent for it. That's fair. Because not everybody has the talent for it, but has the experience, has the knowledge that a teenager would not have. I mean, these are inconsistencies. These are definite inconsistencies. But it is also right now, for what I'm pretty sure we will get later, but at least for right now, it could be said that, no, she's just a hereditary queen. And so she's new to the throne, as in her mother died recently, and so she was ascended to it. And that there's no one else around her for that. It's like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Because you do also have some queens in real history who were incredibly good and capable queens. I mean, very, very impressive figures in history who did shape world history even. I mean, like, Queen Victoria is one that definitely comes to mind. And that's an English queen, but of course there were many other. You would have had... I can't think of her name, but one of the Russian Tsaresses. I'd rather just say Tsar. She also... Catherine the Great, was that it? I don't remember, but again, shaped world history for how she ruled Russia. Then there's also... I don't remember the name either, but there was also, in ancient history, a queen in Africa who actually, like, held off the Roman Empire for a while. I mean, it's like, there are definitely many very strong, impressive queens, so there's nothing wrong with that being the case here, but I do remember being thinking that, no, she's actually elected. So, yeah, it's kind of a problem. So that is an inconsistency I'm expecting to find when we get to it. But for now, it's just the whole, no, she chooses to do the makeup, but then it's also ceremonial, which means that it's expected, it's not a choice, so. Okay. Yeah. So, blah, 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 things go on, and I'm just going to assume you know the movies. It makes it a little bit easier. The Viceroy, Trade Federation Viceroy, hails Darth Sidious to find out what to do. Actually, there's one thing. I do kind of wonder if he knows who Sidious actually is. But in any case, one thing that occurred to me is, yes, watching it, you know who Sidious is. You know Palpatine, Ambassador Palpatine becomes Emperor Palpatine. And you know Darth Sidious would also be him, because he is the Dark Lord. He is the Sith Master. You would know that. It's like, I remember even like in middle school and such, because, you know, people were... That's one that came out for me. Other kids in my classes were talking about that, and how, yes, that is how Sidious is Palpatine, Sidious is the Emperor, so we all knew that. If you don't know that, though, he's really not intimidating. Because the Numidians have already been described as cowards. I in fact, read the thing, in the whole they don't have backbones. So they go there, and they're really intimidated by this guy. Yeah, okay, they're intimidated by everything. So what? He's not a threat. He's not a menace. He's not a menace. Because he's menacing the people that are literally the easiest to menace. It means nothing. Which is actually somewhat interesting, because we'll have to see with Darth Maul how things are presented there. Because I've talked about it in various things. I don't know how much I talked about before. Vader, being so powerful and intimidating and menacing, makes the Emperor more intimidating, because Vader is an underling to the Emperor. He's the Emperor's lieutenant. That's the language I typically use. He's a lieutenant there. He's under him, he serves him. So if you are serving somebody, that somebody should be greater than you. So a good, competent, and imposing lieutenant is very, very significant. And that's kind of the problem here, is that the Numidians are meaningless lieutenants, So it doesn't tell us anything about Sidious. It doesn't make him at all impressive. Maul, however, can change that. Maul, we can expect to be a greater menace, to be a greater threat. But the problem is you're introducing Sidious is not that intimidating. Maul is, which may make you just wonder, okay, well, why is he serving Sidious? And could just be well, Sidious is the planner, Maul is the doer, and is a very competent, capable doer. And yes, I know we're not to Maul yet. We'll get to that in a later chapter. But it's just trying to help give the context that this introduction for Sidious, if you don't know who he is actually it's actually a really, really bad introduction to him. Because it is like, yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm just trying to remember how I introduced some bad guys in one of my books. One guy was an asshole braggart. That's his character, very consistently. Another guy was just creepy. And he's actually the more evil of them. But it's like that maintains. Another guy who was very manipulative. He gets introduced later. And he introduces himself first. I mean, yes, he is not really lying, but he's not telling the whole truth. He doesn't. He is manipulating the situation. And then another who, how does he get introduced? Well, he gets introduced by killing people. And that I mean, it's like they were all introduced accurate to their characters and how I wanted you to be introduced to them, how you should take them to be. The braggart wants to be in power, wants to be in control because he believes that strength determines that. And so he values strength. He doesn't consider anything beyond it. So he's a fool. The creepy guy is actually some manipulative, but he's very quiet in that way. But the thing is, he has the ability to just do certain things that seem very impossible and can make him a very great threat. I don't want to get too much into that. Because one issue with that character is he basically always manipulates the braggart and no one else. So you're not actually seeing that in the story. It'll be interesting when I do these videos for that book. Then another guy, the third guy I mentioned, he only lasts for like a chapter before he gets killed. But again, he is kind of manipulative. In fact, he kind of set up a whole bunch of things that, again, it's not necessarily shown to you because, well, when the person you're following is a party to that conversation. But another guy, straight up bad guy, and he just straight up starts killing and mutilating people. It's very clear who these characters are, and I can build from that. It's like very clear that this guy is not one I need to be really all that concerned with. But we do ultimately know he is more intimidating. But it's a very lousy introduction to it. But one thing that I do find curious, I will make it legal Viceroy. This is in the movie as well. The Viceroy, yes, of course. And the Jedi, I mean, it's like he's not questioning this. And like he's immediately blow up their ship. I will send a squad of battle droids to finish. It's like he is so rapid to accept this. I wonder if he's actually aware there is Ambassador Palpatine. Which, it's also, he's ambassador from Naboo. Palpatine's from Naboo. So is that why he picked Naboo? Because there is that question Qui-Gon asks of why would they blockade Naboo? It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It's not a big deal. Well, the plan itself is not a big deal, and also the blockade here isn't going to disrupt them much either. Well, the ambassador picked one that he would have influence over himself. So, which does also seem a poor idea, because if there were military aggression, he's then risking destroying his own world, which would actually weaken his power, potentially. I mean, he may become a sympathetic figure in the Senate, but if Naboo were captured, he would also become potentially. I don't know. I just feel like that's he should have picked another world. I think makes more sense that there would be more ways to do that. Yeah, what was the last? Oh, yes. That was actually right here, wasn't it? Where is it? Okay. I sense an unusual amount of maneuvering for something as trivial as this trade dispute. This is Qui-Gon saying this. Earlier in the chapter, it said that this dispute has been lasting for months. The blockade is also relatively new. But it's still, this dispute has been lasting for months. Oh, it's trivial. No, it's not! No, not even remotely is it trivial. It's been lasting for months. If it were trivial, it would have been solved in days. It's a blockade. This is a military act, okay? A blockade is actually an act of war. We do recognize it as that, which is why with the Cuban Missile Crisis, the fact that JFK ordered the blockade, that was an act of war against Cuba. That was huge. There's a reason why that was the closest we ever got to the Cold War becoming a hot war. By intentional actions, at least. There were some accidental things as well. But those are acts of war. This is not trivial by any measure. Further, he was asked or ordered by the Supreme Chancellor to do something he's not supposed to do. The Jedi are not supposed to be doing this kind of stuff, okay? This is something for an ambassador to do, not you, not a Jedi, okay? And also, the council was told later, nothing about this is proper. Everything is out of order for this. And he's like, it's trivial. Everyone's reaction to this situation dictates it is not trivial. And he's just, this is inconsistent and bad writing. Okay. It's actually a little bit later. Don't need that anymore. So, yeah, with the Viceroy talking with the Queen, so I had skipped forward earlier and coming back to it now. Your Highness, we would never do anything in defiance of the Senate's will. Aha. The whole situation is the Trade Federation defying the Senate's will. So they're opposing this tax, which, by the way, it actually says somewhere that it's not even clear that there is any basis in law for this tax. Which I do kind of wonder how they're going to explain this. If there is an explanation, there might not be. I mean, just like I was saying that the main character that you follow in that one book I was referencing of mine doesn't know certain things, doesn't see certain things, so I can't explain certain things in there. I know them, but because she doesn't know them, the reader can't know them. So that's fair, but is still, so Palpatine, in theory, managed to put forward applying a tax that's apparently illegal, but the bureaucracy never noticed this, nor did the rest of the Senate, but they put that in place. And then he conspired to get the Trade Federation to follow him, which, whatever. But still is, they oppose the tax. They start a blockade. They've destroyed an ambassador's ship. This has already happened, and it is actually... It's at the Small Republic space cruiser. This is the first sentence of the chapter. Its red color, the symbol of ambassadorial neutrality, knifed through starry blackness toward the emerald bright planet of Naboo and the cluster of Trade Federation ships and so. But its red color, the symbol of ambassadorial neutrality. He's already blown it up. Oh no, I would never do anything in defiance of the Senate. You just blew up an ambassadorial ship. That means it's a ship from the Senate. Doesn't matter that they weren't actual ambassadors on there, that they were Jedi. Doesn't matter. You just blew up the Senate's ship, and you killed a pilot and co-pilot, a captain and co-pilot, as well, and potentially other crew members. So you did all that. They've assaulted the two Jedi, and they're invading Naboo. Like, he's already given the order to start invading Naboo. Which, to be fair, Sidious told him to do that, but still. Now, granted, he's like, oh, but he's lying. It's like, yeah, but it's a ridiculous lie. I mean, it's like, what is the Queen? I mean, from the Queen's point of view, she would be aware of, you started a blockade. That's in defiance of the Senate. You're opposing the tax that the Senate has levied. You're in defiance of that. I mean, it's like, she could have quipped back immediately by just saying, then you're ending the blockade that the Senate is in disagreement about. You're going to start paying the tax that they have said you must pay. So you're going to start doing that because you are in defiance of the Senate right now. I get how it's a nice line there. I get it. But it still is. This is poor writing. This really is. Because it is too obviously a lie, I feel. And it's just, why wouldn't she call the lie? Why wouldn't she call him on that? There's no reason for her not to. And it is also, she's supposed to be very intelligent, very good at this. And it's like, why is he even bringing this up? Because she's saying that, well, the Senate is voting now, and basically, well, you're going to lose that vote. And so he's like, well, if that's the case, I'll do whatever the Senate desires me to. But it's like, you've been in defiance this whole time. It's just, I guess part of the reason why I'm so frustrated here is the level of dishonesty is so unnecessary. It's like, I'm already blockading you. I mean, it's like, why can't you let him be a little bit more assertive with that? Yeah, beware, Viceroy. The Federation has gone too far this time. Your Highness, we would never do anything in defiance of the Senate's will. You assume too much. It's like, but I'm sorry. If she had called him out right there, that's like, you are in defiance of the Senate's will by blockading my world. You are in defiance of the Senate's will. I mean, it's such a stupid line because she says it, and what is he going to respond? He has no response. He cannot respond. It is such a bad lie. And because if you want to be like, oh, well, he's a politician, and so he's just lying like that, lying like a politician. It's like, a politician is a good politician lies in ways that they're half-truths, that they can always be spun, that no, I didn't lie. It's like, this is, no, just straight up nonsensical lie. Bold-faced, bald-faced, however that goes, lie. Sorry, it's getting late, my throat hurts, and yeah, it just, yeah, I was really hoping for things to be more coherent and consistent. Really was. See how it goes. I mean, it might not get worse. Can it get better? Well, not really. No, and I mean that as in, it doesn't matter if the rest of the book is perfect. It still has this imperfection in it, so it can't get better from where it is. It's just... Sorry, but I mean, that's one thing I also have learned with when I was more actively doing video game reviews, is that there's never going to be a game where, oh yeah, the beginning is absolute garbage, but it gets really good at the end. It's like, if it's absolute garbage at the beginning, you stop playing it before you get to the end. Okay? I mean, if you're forcing yourself through it to get to the end for this great payoff, it's like, well, that does make it a good game because you have to force yourself through it. So, I mean, it's the same kind of situation applies here or any story. And my stories as well. Don't ever think that you can't criticize my stories. I'm going to probably end up criticizing them at some point in these videos. Maybe. I don't know. I don't really know if I can criticize them, to be honest. I know them too well. I think it might just be more so my commentary on there. But it's still, if I find things I did do wrong, I'll probably talk about those a lot. We'll see. It's just, from my perspective, do I necessarily recognize that I'll have done them wrong? But in any case, that'll be a ways out. I'll have to finish this first. I also want to finish at least the first draft of the book I'm writing before I get to that stuff. That'll be fun. Oh, Terry Brooks, he's the one doing it. That is also true. Based on the story and screenplay by George Lucas. So there is also the question of how much of that is because of multiple people being involved. Because some of the inconsistencies, someone being on the same page, that's a problem. But it could be conflicting visions will lead to some of that. But it still is that's what a good editor, at least, is supposed to be taken care of. It's supposed to be like, wait, this doesn't mesh up. Let's straighten these bent lines, these crooked lines. So, Anyway. Chapter 4 is next, which should have... I just want to... Yeah, so that's them landing on Naboo. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan coming to Naboo. And we'll meet Jar Jar, which... That'll be interesting. That will be interesting. Because Jar Jar is an interesting character, because on the one hand, I completely understand why he is present and why he is the way he is. That doesn't necessarily mean he's not frustrating. As a character, in the movie at least. I don't remember him well enough in the book. Yeah. I mean, it's just... Yeah. I understand why people dislike Jar Jar. I also understand the role that he plays. So it's... Alright. It'll be fun to see him introduced. See you next time.